Hey everyone, it's Mr. Davis. I was going to pick up where we left off last week with some of the drawing exercises that we did. So the drawing exercises last week, I hope you got to see the video, and if not, I will post a link in the description. But we used a paper plate over our hand to block our hand as we were drawing some things in front of us. So I think we did some plants, we did some other objects, and this week we're going to take that concept, looking at something while we're drawing, not looking at what we're drawing, but really trying to look at the edge of something, and we're going to use it to create a still life. So if you remember from last week, a still life is just anything that doesn't move. So that's why it's so easy for people to practice drawing with still lifes, and why they have for so long is it is just something that does not move. And we can arrange it any way that we like. So before you start, I want you to gather some things for a still life. You don't need a whole bunch, but I do have a bowl of fruit here, a couple lemons and a mineola, and I have a succulent plant. So if you have a plant laying around, I don't have many toys where I live, but I do have a couple little figurines here. Hold them up so you can see. One is a little squat little dragon from Japan, and one is a little wizard that my friend gave me, so I might be drawing those. So those are what we need to draw for our still life. So if you want to gather those, the rest of the materials are, you're going to need something dark to draw with. So that could either be one of a bunch of different markers. Remember, if you use a Sharpie, have something behind it. Or I might use a dark colored pencil today. The next thing you need is something to color with. So I have all sorts of things to show you, but if you just have one of these or something different, please color with that. So I have colored pencils, crayons, or markers, whatever you're most comfortable with. I have some tape, which I'm going to use to tape a couple pieces of paper together to make a bigger piece for our still life. I have a few pictures here, or you can use different kinds of paper, but we're gonna create a vase for our still life. So you could just use lined paper. If you have some of that yellow lined paper, that stuff works pretty nicely. Any different colored paper, it could be brown paper from a bag. I found these in a magazine. So if you have a magazine or a newspaper laying around, or an old book that you were going to throw out, that could be okay too. And then the last thing we're going to need is a pair of scissors to cut our vase. So pause the video, give yourself some time to gather up that stuff. Remember, for the still lifes, we could have fruit, vegetables, plants, toys, any combination of all of them. So take a minute, pause the video, and come on back when you have the supplies you want. And one more thing we need is actually a glue stick. So grab that and we can get started. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to tape a couple pieces of paper together. If you have a really big sheet of paper, that's fine too. But I've just lined up a couple sheets together. Sometimes I make them overlap a little bit. And I'm just going to put a piece of tape right down the middle. Flip that over. And now my seam is right here. There's no tape in sight. And this gives me a nice big drawing surface I can use. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a vase. Now I could just draw this vase right here. But I think it might be more fun to make one and use that for our still life. So I have a couple colored sheets of paper here, and I am going to use these to make a vase. So I'm going to pick one. I think I really like this one. Kind of looks like it's on the inside of a factory. And I'm not sure if you remember this, but for symmetry, we want to fold something in half. And I want to leave the folded part of my paper alone. I'm going to be cutting all over this side of the paper, but this side I'm going to leave relatively alone. So to make my vase, I'm going to start by just cutting a flat shape out. I ripped this out of a magazine, so I definitely want this side to be flat. And then I'm going to cut some kind of wavy, crazy line all the way up to the top here. And remember, I'm going to leave the folded part alone. I'm going to be only cutting on the flappy side. So I'm going to cut a curvy line from bottom to top. And you could make yours kind of zigzaggy or however you like. I'm going to open it up, see what my vase looks like. That's kind of a wide vase. That's a little bit wider than I wanted. So let's try again. I'm also not sure if I like this yellow part on top, so I'm going to snip that off. So if I want to make it a little bit thinner, all I have to do is cut a little closer to that fold line that we made. Like this. I'm still doing kind of these curvy lines. And then it gets a little bigger at the top. And that looks a little bit more like a vase to me. So I'm going to stick some glue on the other side because I want my pretty blue side to be on top. Alright. I'll stick it somewhere on my page. How about right here? And then I'm going to draw some of my plants coming out of the top of the vase. Hopefully you have a plant laying around, maybe even a fake one is just fine, or maybe you could find something outside and bring it in. But just like we learned last week, we're going to be staring at the plant while we're drawing it. So for the stems, for the leaves, and I'm going to use my dark pencil to start and color it in later. So I'm going to start to set up my still life. So maybe I'll move my colored pencils over on this side, like that. Move my markers and crayons aside. And I have to cap my glue stick. I have my plants. I have my fruits. If I want to add a couple objects here, or you guys could use toys or figurines or whatever, I'm going to start drawing my plant in my vase. So it's going to be coming out of the top of my vase. I'm just looking at this plant as much as I can. Really staring at those leaves and petals. I don't know what you'd call those on a succulent. Would they be leaves? So just trying to get all of them on there. There's some more succulents. I can even overlap like this, it's fine. There's no right or wrong with this exercise. There's a different plant in the middle. It's got kind of pointier leaves. So I'm just doing my best to stare at the plants in front of me while I'm drawing, and that can be a little hard to do at first. But what it does is drawing from life helps us look at the shapes in front of us without just making them up in our head. So that's the good thing about still life. There's kind of a plant with some sort of zigzaggy leaves in the back. Maybe I'll make that kind of hanging off the side a little bit. That. Yours might get crowded, that's okay. And if you do have paints at home, this might be a fun thing to watercolor paint. And if you don't, I think it's equally fun to use markers on these. So I got my plant done. I am going to draw my bowl with my fruits in there. So again, same thing. It's going to be a little simpler because these shapes are pretty oval, kind of circular shapes. So it's going to be kind of similar and maybe a little bit simpler to draw this because I'm used to drawing simple shapes. I'm going to draw my bowl. I can see that there's a bottom to the bowl, so I'm going to make an extra round shape down there, like that. And then I'm going to do my best to look at these fruits while I draw them. Sometimes I kind of air trace what I'm looking at. Staring at that fruit, tracing that line, not worrying about what it looks like on the paper. And I see the top of the lemon has a little stem there. And if you want, you can give it texture. A lot of citrus fruits have dots on them. So I can add some dots for texture. Sometimes they look kind of bumpy, so maybe that might look like bumps. We're going to color this all in just a little bit, but sometimes adding that texture helps people know, oh, that's a lemon, or oh, that's a Mineola, which is the orange one. It's not quite an orange, it's a Mineola. So if you have toys, now is a great time to draw them. This is going to be a little tricky for me because these figurines are kind of small, but I'll do my best. So if you have toys in your still life, if you have a toy you really like, feel free to draw it. I've got this little wizard down here. I'm going to scooch it up so you can see. He's got a crystal ball. Big flappy coat. Like that. He's got some ruby eyes, which are pretty cool. And I've got this little figurine over here from Japan. So, using my eyes to look at the objects while I trace them. Square little dragon from Japan. Okay. And sometimes it helps to just, if you draw really light underneath your objects, kind of makes it look like there's a shadow under there. Okay, so I'm gonna scooch this stuff back a little bit because I'm all done drawing it. Now I get to color. So you could color in with colored pencil. I think I might do markers. You could do crayons if you have crayons. I think I'm gonna go with markers today. So I'll bring my markers out for the plants. I'm gonna start all of them with green, and then I'll show you a trick on how to add some extra colors after. So I'm gonna start coloring in my plants. One trick I use to stay in the lines, if you remember, is called a bumper line. I go around the outside of my shape like that, and then it makes it easier for me to fill it in. So, just gonna go around. Again, if you have paint and you want to try painting it, that might be fun. Sometimes on this computer paper, the thinner stuff, paint doesn't do so well because water really wrinkles the paper. But if you have paper that's a little thicker, sometimes that works out. Or maybe you don't mind the wrinkles. That's fine too. So going around. Luckily all of these are green, but some of them have tints of yellow and brown in them. And so I'll show you how we could add some of that in just a minute. Coloring in my zigzag leaves here on my succulent. Succulents are really cool because you don't have to water them every day. They need pretty low water, I think. So I'm going to color in the rest first, and then I'm going to come back to the plant. The inside of my bowl here is actually pretty dark. Let's see, where did that little colored pencil go? Did it run off? Let me see, did it go under the box? I only have one desk and I'm losing stuff. That's okay. What I could do is I could use some gray in there. So just to show that inside of the bowl is dark, I could color that in like this. You could do it with a crayon or colored pencils. And I'm going to color in my Mineola. Some of the fruits you could give a little shine to if you want. Remember, just leave some of it blank if you want it to shine. So I see a little bit of shininess on the top of my Mineola here. So I am going to use those bumper lines, color it in, and leave some of it blank for a shine. Time to do my 2 lemons. Again, I see some blank spots where I see shine on the lemons. So I'm going to draw those shapes and go around them. Color it in. Now sometimes right after using a marker, you don't want to go over it with anything because it's still kind of wet and it might rip your paper. My wizard is gray, except for the eyes. The eyes are red, so I'll leave those blank, like that. And my little dragon is orange, with white eyes and white teeth. So I'm going to very carefully try to not color those in, but I drew them very small. Parts of the dragon are red too, but I'm just going for kind of the base color, the color I see the most of, which is orange here. All right, we're good. So now, as I was saying, you can color in, if I see parts of my plant have some brown in them, like some of this succulent has brown in it, some of the succulents to the far right have yellow in them, I could either go over it with crayon or colored pencil, sort of add some of those colors. So I'm going to add some yellow into these succulents, lighten them up a little bit. On this right side here, I'm going to add a little bit of brown on, looks like there's some brown on the edges of these ones, this thin one in the middle. And then it looks like there's a little bit of brown, so I'm drawing very light on some of my succulents on this side of the paper. Stem's a little darker. So those look a little bit more unique now. And the bottom of my bowl is actually a little bit darker than I have it here. So I'm going to take some of my gray and just kind of go into the bottom. You can still see the edge of the bowl is going to be white, but I'm going to use some gray to show that the bottom of my bowl is a little dark. The sun went behind some clouds too, so it's a little darker in the room. And I see some darkness on some of my fruits too, so I could add a little gray in there if I want. You could add black, you could add a darker version of the color. But that helps it look a little bit more like it's popping out on the page. Same with the wizard and the dragon. I said there was some red in the dragon, so I got some red there. And in the wizard, he's pretty dark. He has red eyes, and I see some folds in his robe that are black, so I'm just going to add some texture to my wizard. You can choose to add details like this or just keep yours really simple. I'm going to add the red eyes. And I'm going to add, almost looks like this dragon has like a red beard. Some eyebrows, some ears. And look at that, we got ourselves a still life. So hopefully you were able to follow along and find some things at home. You do not have to have the exact same things, don't feel like you do. If not, I hope you at least have some interest in the video and maybe you want to make your own still life later. I hope you had fun watching, and now this is a great thing to practice while we're away. So take care, and I will see you next time.